In the quiet town of Millfield, one man's dream to build a community center becomes a battle for justice. Marcus Richardson, former FBI director, returns to his hometown to fulfill a promise to his late mother. But when the corrupt Mayor Harrington tries to shut down his community center for a luxury development, Marcus must use all his skills to fight back. What the mayor doesn't know is that he's not dealing with just any retiree. He's facing a man who spent 30 years taking down corrupt officials just like him. As the mayor escalates his attacks, from false accusations to property damage, Marcus methodically builds a case that will expose decades of discrimination and corruption. Witness a masterclass in strategic justice as Marcus connects the dots, gathers allies, and turns the tables on those who abuse power. Will one man's determination be enough to save a neighborhood from those who would destroy it for profit? Follow Marcus Richardson's journey as he proves that even in retirement, a champion of justice never stops fighting for what's right. Do you think the mayor got what he deserved, or was justice too harsh? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of powerful comeuppance against those who underestimate the wrong person. Marcus Richardson stepped back to admire the freshly painted sign above the entrance. Harmony Heights Community Center. At 62, the former FBI director had returned to his hometown of Millfield to fulfill a promise he'd made to his late mother, to create a safe haven for the neighborhood children and seniors. The modest brick building had once been an abandoned recreation center. Now, after 6 months of renovations funded by Marcus's retirement savings and community donations, it was ready to open its doors. The center featured a computer lab, library, basketball court, and meeting rooms for job training and senior activities. "Looks perfect, Mr. Richardson," said Darius, a 19-year-old from the neighborhood who'd helped with the renovations. "My little brother can't wait for the after-school program." Marcus nodded, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "That's what it's all about, giving our youth options and our seniors company." He didn't mention his 30-year career with the FBI, rising from field agent to the agency's first black director. Here in Millfield, he was simply Mr. Richardson, the hometown boy who'd made good and come back to help. The community center was set to officially open Saturday. Marcus had obtained all the necessary permits, passed every inspection, and even invited Mayor William Harrington to cut the ribbon. Though the mayor hadn't confirmed his attendance, Marcus remained hopeful that city leadership would recognize the center's value. As Marcus was locking up, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Mayor Harrington stepped out, accompanied by his chief of staff and 2 men in suits. Marcus straightened his posture, a habit from his FBI days, and extended his hand. "Mayor Harrington, what a pleasant surprise. We're honored you came to see the center before the opening." The mayor, a tall, silver-haired man in his 50s, ignored Marcus's outstretched hand. "Mr. Richardson, I'm afraid there won't be an opening." Marcus's hand dropped slowly. "I don't understand. We've passed all inspections and—" "There's been a zoning issue identified," the mayor cut in, his voice coldly official. "This area is not approved for the type of community facility you're proposing. With all due respect, Mayor, I have the zoning approval right here." Marcus reached for his phone to show the documentation, signed by the city planning department 3 months ago. The mayor's chief of staff, a thin woman with a permanent frown, stepped forward. That approval was issued in error. "The city council has reviewed the matter and determined this neighborhood is better suited for commercial development." As if on cue, one of the suited men handed Marcus an envelope. "This is a cease and desist order. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises." Marcus felt a cold anger rising but kept his voice steady. "Mayor Harrington, 30 children are enrolled in our after-school program starting Monday. We have seniors counting on meal services. Perhaps we could discuss a temporary—" "The decision is final," the mayor said, turning back toward his vehicle. Then he paused and added with a dismissive glance, "You people always want special treatment. Perhaps if you'd chosen a more appropriate neighborhood, things might have gone differently." Marcus stood perfectly still, his face impassive as he watched them drive away. Only Darius, who had witnessed the entire exchange, could see the slight tremor in the older man's hands, not from fear but from the effort of containing his rage. "Mr. Richardson, what are we going to do?" Darius asked, his voice thick with disappointment. Marcus took a deep breath and straightened his shoulders. "First, we document everything that just happened. Then we make some calls." He didn't mention that among those calls would be to former colleagues who owed him favors from his FBI days, people who could help him understand why the mayor had suddenly taken such interest in a small community center. "Are they really going to shut us down?" Darius asked. Marcus looked at the young man thoughtfully. "Let me tell you something I learned during my career, Darius. When people abuse power, they often leave a trail. And finding that trail is something I happen to be very good at." What the mayor didn't know was that Marcus Richardson hadn't just been any FBI director. He'd specialized in public corruption cases before his promotion, taking down 3 governors and numerous city officials during his career. If Mayor Harrington was using his office improperly, Marcus had the skills and the connections to expose it. That night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table reviewing every document related to the community center. In a notebook, he methodically listed every interaction with city officials, every permit, every inspection. His training had taught him to start with the facts and look for patterns. His phone rang. It was his old colleague, Sandra Martinez, returning his call. "Marcus, I ran that name you gave me. Your Mayor Harrington has some interesting financial connections. There's a developer called Platinum Properties that's made significant contributions to his campaign. And guess what property they acquired options on last month?" Marcus's pen stilled on the paper. "The blocks surrounding the community center. Bingo, they're planning a luxury condo development. A community center serving low-income residents doesn't fit their vision." Marcus thanked her and hung up, his mind already mapping out his next steps. He hadn't planned to fight City Hall in his retirement, but some battles chose you. "All right, Mr. Mayor," he murmured to himself as he reached for his laptop. "You've made this personal, now let's see what else you're hiding." Marcus spent the next morning making strategic phone calls to old contacts. By noon, he'd spoken with 3 former FBI colleagues now working in various federal agencies. His home office walls were covered with printouts and sticky notes, a crime board taking shape just as he'd taught countless agents to build during investigations. "Thank you, James. I appreciate the information," Marcus said, ending his call with a former financial crimes specialist. He added another note to his growing web of connections. The picture becoming clear was troubling. Platinum Properties, the developer with options on the surrounding blocks, was partially owned by the mayor's brother-in-law through a shell company. The rezoning request had been fast-tracked through channels normally requiring months of review. Most concerning was the $2.4 million in campaign contributions that seemed to originate from entities connected to the development. Marcus's doorbell rang at 12:30 p.m. Angela Washington, a reporter from the Millfield Gazette he'd contacted that morning, stood on his porch with a notebook in hand. "Mr. Richardson, I'm Angela Washington. You mentioned you had information about Mayor Harrington's development plans for the East Side." Marcus invited her in, carefully gauging her reactions as he laid out the facts, only the facts he'd gathered. He didn't mention his FBI background, presenting himself simply as a concerned citizen whose community project had been unexpectedly shuttered. "This is concerning," Angela said, reviewing the documents Marcus provided. "The paper's been investigating the mayor's development deals for months, but we haven't been able to connect all these dots." "I'm good at connecting dots," Marcus replied modestly, "and I believe in keeping thorough records." Angela looked up from her notes. "You said the mayor made some questionable comments when delivering the cease and desist." Marcus nodded and played a recording from his phone, the entire interaction with the mayor captured clearly, including the dismissive "you people" comment and the implication that the neighborhood was unsuitable for community services. Angela's eyes widened. "You recorded this." "Old habit," Marcus said with a slight smile. "When dealing with officials, I find documentation prevents misunderstandings." After Angela left, promising a story in the next day's paper, Marcus received a text from Darius. "Mr. Our city workers are changing locks at the center. What should we do?" Marcus grabbed his keys. "Take video, don't interfere, I'm on my way." When he arrived at the community center, a small crowd of neighborhood residents had gathered, watching as workers changed the locks under the supervision of a city code enforcement officer. Marcus approached calmly, hands visible, aware that as a black man confronting officials, his demeanor would be scrutinized. "Excuse me, officer, I'm Marcus Richardson, the property manager. May I see the work order authorizing this lock change?" The code enforcement officer, a young man with a nervous demeanor, handed over a document. Marcus reviewed it carefully, noting the mayor's signature and the missing required approval from the building department. "Officer Davis," Marcus said, reading the man's nameplate, "this order lacks proper authorization. Building Code 17.4 requires building department approval for any city-mandated lock changes. Additionally, we haven't reached the 48-hour deadline in the cease and desist order." Officer Davis hesitated, clearly unprepared for someone who knew city regulations. "I'm just following orders, sir." "I understand," Marcus said evenly, "and I'd like to help you avoid a procedural violation. May I suggest you contact your supervisor before proceeding? I'd hate for you to be placed in a difficult position due to incomplete paperwork." The crowd had grown, several people recording the interaction on their phones. Marcus maintained his professional demeanor, never raising his voice or showing frustration. Officer Davis stepped away to make a call, and Marcus used the moment to address the gathered community members. "Folks, please remain calm and peaceful. We're working through a misunderstanding with the city. Your support means everything, but please let's handle this properly." 20 minutes later, Officer Davis returned. "We've been instructed to suspend the lock change pending review of the paperwork," he announced, signaling the workers to pack up. A cheer went up from the crowd. Marcus thanked Officer Davis professionally, and once the city employees departed, he turned to Darius. "That buys us time, but the mayor won't be happy. Let's use this moment wisely." That evening, as Marcus was reviewing property records, his doorbell rang again. This time, it was Harold Jenkins, an elderly man who had been on the city council for 3 decades before retiring the previous year. "Marcus, my boy, may I come in?" Harold had known Marcus since he was a child and had been a friend of his parents. Once seated, Harold got straight to the point. "I heard about what happened at the center. Harrington's gone too far this time." "You know something about this, Mr. Jenkins?" Harold nodded gravely. "Harrington's been planning this development for years. That community center of yours sits right where they want to build the main entrance to their luxury complex, but there's more to it." Harold explained that environmental studies had found contamination on parts of the proposed development site, contamination that would require millions to clean up. The mayor's plan was to have taxpayers fund the cleanup through a special assessment district, essentially subsidizing the private development while forcing longtime residents out through increased property taxes. "They need your property to avoid the worst of the contaminated areas," Harold explained. "It's the only parcel in that block that's clean." Marcus processed this information, adding it to his mental case file. "Mr. Jenkins, would you be willing to make a statement on record about this?" Harold hesitated. "Harrington has a lot of powerful friends, Marcus." "So do I," Marcus replied quietly, "and I believe in protecting people who do the right thing." Before Harold left, he handed Marcus a USB drive. "These are files I copied before retiring, meeting minutes that never made the official record, emails about the development that shouldn't have been sent on city servers. I've been waiting for someone with the courage to use them." After Harold departed, Marcus plugged in the drive and began systematically reviewing its contents. The files confirmed everything Harold had said and revealed much more. There was a clear pattern of the mayor and select council members manipulating zoning, inspections, and tax assessments to benefit preferred developers while targeting properties owned by Black and Hispanic residents for code violations. Marcus worked through the night, organizing the evidence and preparing his next steps. By dawn, he had a clear strategy. The mayor had expected an easy victory against a retiree opening a community center. He had no idea he was facing someone who had spent decades investigating corruption at the highest levels. "Time to show the mayor who he's really dealing with," Marcus murmured as he made his first call of the day to the state attorney general's office, where his former deputy now served as chief investigator. By mid-morning, Marcus's methodical approach was bearing fruit. The Millfield Gazette's front-page headline read, "Mayor's Development Deal Raises Ethics Questions." Angela Washington's article outlined the questionable timing of the community center shutdown and its connection to the planned luxury development, though it carefully avoided making direct accusations without proof. Marcus sat at his dining room table, now converted into an operations center. 3 laptops were open, one displaying property records, another showing emails from Harold's USB drive, and the third tracking the growing social media response to the newspaper article. "Mr. Richardson, you've got visitors," called Darius from the front door, where he'd been helping organize community volunteers. Marcus looked up to see Sandra Martinez, his former FBI colleague, accompanied by Thomas Chen from the state attorney general's office. Both were in business casual attire, maintaining a low profile. "Marcus," Sandra greeted him with a warm handshake. "Tom and I have reviewed the initial documentation you sent. This looks like textbook public corruption with potential civil rights violations." Thomas nodded, scanning the organized evidence boards with an impressed expression. "You haven't lost your touch, Marcus. The AG is very interested, but we need to move carefully. Mayor Harrington has connections in the governor's office." "I'm aware," Marcus replied, pulling up a relationship map on one of the laptops. "That's why we're pursuing multiple approaches simultaneously." He outlined his strategy. While the state investigation would proceed quietly, they would also build community pressure and create a documentary record that couldn't be easily dismissed. The 3 former law enforcement officers spoke in the shorthand of experienced investigators, evaluating contingencies and identifying potential weaknesses in their approach. "Our biggest vulnerability is timing," Marcus explained. "The 48-hour deadline expires tomorrow, and Harrington will likely send police to enforce the order." "What's your play?" Sandra asked. "Harold Jenkins has agreed to file for an emergency injunction this afternoon as a former councilman. Judge Patricia Morris is presiding. She's fair and by the book." Thomas made a note. "And if the injunction fails, then we move to Plan B," Marcus said, pulling out architectural plans for the community center. The building meets all requirements for temporary emergency shelter under State Law 116.42. I've already filed the paperwork to redesignate it, which would trigger state-level protections and mandatory review periods. Sandra smiled. Always thinking 3 moves ahead. Their strategy session was interrupted by an urgent knock. Angela Washington entered, visibly agitated. "Mr. Richardson, the mayor just called a press conference for 2 p.m. My sources say he's going to publicly accuse you of violating multiple city ordinances and possibly criminal trespassing if you return to the community center." Marcus checked his watch. "That gives us 4 hours. Angela, would you be willing to attend and ask specific questions?" He handed her a notepad with carefully crafted inquiries designed to force the mayor to either lie publicly or admit to facts that would later prove damaging. "Absolutely," she agreed, scanning the questions. "These are good, they don't appear hostile but create a record we can use later." By noon, Judge Morris had granted the emergency injunction, preventing city officials from changing locks or restricting access to the community center for 7 days pending a full hearing. Marcus received the news via text as he was meeting with community members at a local church, organizing their response. "This buys us time," he told the gathered residents, "but we need to prepare for a longer fight." The church pastor, Reverend Jackson, stepped forward. "Marcus, many of these folks remember when you were just a skinny kid running these streets before you went off to college. They're proud of what you've accomplished, but they're scared. The mayor has used code enforcement to push people out before." Marcus nodded solemnly. "I understand their concerns. That's why we're not just fighting for the community center. We're going to expose the entire pattern of selective enforcement and corruption." He turned to address the assembled neighbors directly. "I need something from each of you. If you've received unusual code violations, tax assessments, or have been approached about selling your property in the last 3 years, please fill out these forms." Marcus distributed documentation templates he'd prepared. "This isn't just about one building. It's about our right to exist in the neighborhood we built." As the community meeting continued, Marcus received an urgent call from Officer Davis, the code enforcement officer from the previous day. "Mr. Richardson," Davis said, his voice low and anxious, "I'm taking a huge risk calling you. There's a meeting happening right now. The mayor is instructing us to find violations at homes surrounding the community center targeting specific addresses." "Officer Davis, would you be willing to document this?" Marcus asked calmly. I could lose my job." "I understand, but what they're doing is illegal and I promise you'll have protection as a whistleblower." There was a long pause before Davis responded. "I'll record the next meeting. They're planning to hit 5 properties tomorrow morning." After ending the call, Marcus immediately contacted Sandra and Thomas to update them. "The mayor's accelerating his timeline. We need to move faster." At 2 p.m., as planned, Mayor Harrington held his press conference on the steps of City Hall. Marcus watched the live stream as the mayor, looking confident in an expensive suit, addressed the cameras. "It has come to my attention that certain individuals are spreading misinformation about the city's development plans," the mayor began. "Let me be clear. Our vision for East Millfield is about progress and economic opportunity for all residents." The mayor continued, painting Marcus as an obstructionist opposed to neighborhood improvement. Then came the accusations. "Mr. Richardson has repeatedly violated city ordinances and has misrepresented his community center's purposes to bypass proper zoning requirements." Angela Washington raised her hand, and when called upon, asked her first prepared question. "Mayor Harrington, can you explain why the community center received all necessary approvals and passed inspections just 3 weeks ago, but is suddenly in violation now?" The mayor faltered momentarily. "New information has come to light regarding the property's intended use." "And what specific information would that be?" Angela pressed. "That's currently under review by City Legal," the mayor deflected. "Next question." As the press conference continued, Angela methodically worked through the prepared questions, creating the public record Marcus needed. Other reporters, sensing blood in the water, began asking their own pointed questions about the timing of the shutdown and the mayor's connections to Platinum Properties. By the time the mayor cut the press conference short, visibly flustered, Marcus was already receiving text messages from community members watching the live stream. The tide of public opinion was shifting. That evening, Marcus received an unexpected visitor at his home. Calvin Pierce, the mayor's chief of staff, stood on his porch looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Richardson, may I speak with you privately?" Marcus invited him in but activated the recording app on his phone as they sat in the living room. "The mayor sent me to explore options for resolving this situation amicably," Pierce began. "I'm listening," Marcus replied neutrally. "If you were to voluntarily surrender the community center property, the city would be willing to provide a generous compensation package and assist in finding an alternative location in a more suitable area of town." Marcus leaned forward slightly. And what makes our current location unsuitable, Mr. Pierce? Pierce shifted uncomfortably. The city's development priorities have changed. The east side is being repositioned for higher density, upscale housing that will increase the tax base and benefit everyone. Everyone except the people who currently live there, Marcus observed. Mr. Pierce, let me be direct. I have documentation of systematic targeting of minority-owned properties through selective code enforcement. I have evidence of the mayor directing city employees to manufacture violations, and I have the financial connections between Platinum Properties and the mayor's family members. Pierce's face paled visibly. So my answer is no, Marcus continued calmly, but you can tell the mayor something from me. This can end one of two ways. He can withdraw the cease and desist order and allow the community center to operate as approved, or he can continue this fight and lose everything, his position, his reputation, and possibly his freedom. After Pierce left, Marcus received a text from Officer Davis. Meeting recorded. They're targeting 5 properties tomorrow, all owned by black families. What should I do with the recording? Marcus smiled slightly. The chess pieces were moving into position. Send it directly to this secure email, he replied. And Officer Davis, thank you for doing the right thing. By 7 a.m. the next morning, Marcus had transformed his living room into a fully operational command center. 3 volunteers from the neighborhood, all with professional backgrounds in administration or legal support, sat at folding tables, organizing testimonials and documentation from residents. Darius coordinated a rotation of community members stationed outside the 5 properties Officer Davis had identified as targets for today's inspection sweep. Marcus studied a digital map on his tablet, marker pins highlighting the targeted homes. Notice the pattern? He asked Sandra, who had arrived early to help coordinate. They form a perfect perimeter around the development zone, she observed, creating pressure points to force sales. Marcus nodded. Classic encirclement strategy. But they made a critical mistake targeting Mrs. Alina Robinson's house. Why's that? Because Alina taught civics for 40 years and has kept immaculate records of every interaction with city officials since 1975, Marcus said with a smile, including 3 instances where the mayor's office previously certified her property as exceeding code requirements during neighborhood beautification contests. At 8:30 a.m., Thomas Chen from the Attorney General's office called. Marcus, we've reviewed Officer Davis's recording. It's damning. The mayor explicitly directed targeting based on race and property value potential. The AG has authorized a formal investigation. How soon? Marcus asked, checking his watch. We need at least 48 hours to prepare the documentation properly. Can you hold them off that long? We'll manage, Marcus assured him. Just then, Angela Washington texted, Mayor called emergency council meeting for noon. Sources say he's seeking authorization to declare community center a public nuisance, bypassing the injunction. Marcus immediately called Judge Morris's clerk, alerting them to the potential end run around the court order. Then he reached out to Harold Jenkins. Harold, we need every allied council member at that emergency session. The mayor's trying to override the injunction through the nuisance ordinance. I'm already on it, Harold replied. 3 council members have agreed to walk out if he tries it, which would prevent quorum. But Marcus Harrington is getting desperate. That makes him dangerous. I'm counting on it, Marcus said. Desperate people make mistakes. By 9 a.m., city vehicles began arriving at the targeted properties. Marcus had stationed volunteers with cameras at each location, instructed to record everything while maintaining respectful distances. At Mrs. Robinson's house, Marcus himself stood on the sidewalk, documenting as 2 code enforcement officers approached her door. Good morning, gentlemen, Marcus called pleasantly. Beautiful day for an inspection. The officers turned, surprised to find him there. One of them, not Officer Davis, frowned. Sir, this is official city business. Of course, Marcus agreed. And as Mrs. Robinson's designated representative, she's 86, you understand, I'll be accompanying you during this inspection. He held up a notarized authorization form. I believe City Ordinance 34.2 allows for homeowner representation during unscheduled inspections. The officers exchanged glances. This was not part of their briefing. Additionally, Marcus continued pleasantly, I've taken the liberty of preparing Mrs. Robinson's complete property maintenance records for your convenience. He handed them a thick binder. You'll find the most recent independent inspection was just 3 months ago with certification of full code compliance. I've tabbed the relevant sections for you. The senior officer flipped through the binder, his expression darkening. We'll still need to conduct our inspection. Absolutely, Marcus agreed. Please lead the way. I'll be recording the inspection as permitted under state law. Similar scenes played out at the other 4 properties with Marcus's volunteers, many retired professionals themselves, politely but firmly establishing their presence and documentation protocols. By 10:30 a.m., Marcus received texts from all locations. Not a single citation had been issued. The code enforcement teams, faced with meticulous documentation and witnesses, had found no violations they could justify. At 11 a.m., Marcus received an unexpected call from Mayor Harrington himself. "Richardson," the mayor's voice was tightly controlled, "this has gone far enough. You're interfering with city operations." "Good morning, Mayor Harrington," Marcus replied calmly. "I'm simply helping neighbors exercise their legal rights to representation during inspections. Is there something wrong with that? Cut the act, I know what you're doing." "And what might that be, sir?" the mayor's voice lowered. "Listen carefully. I don't know who you think you are, coming back to Millfield and stirring up trouble, but you're out of your depth. This development is happening. The community center is finished. If you're smart, you'll take the buyout offer and walk away before things get unpleasant." Marcus activated his recording app. "Mayor Harrington, are you threatening me? I'm advising you as a public official that your actions have consequences." "I see. And would these consequences include the selective enforcement against properties owned by black residents, or perhaps the manipulated zoning changes benefiting your brother-in-law's company?" There was a long silence before the mayor spoke again. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually, sir, I believe it's the other way around," Marcus replied evenly. "The state attorney general's office has opened an investigation into your administration's pattern of civil rights violations and corruption." Officer Davis provided quite an illuminating recording of yesterday's meeting. The silence that followed told Marcus everything he needed to know. "The emergency council meeting at noon," Marcus continued. "I suggest you cancel it. Any attempt to circumvent Judge Morris's injunction will be documented and added to the investigation." "Good day, Mayor." Marcus ended the call and turned to Sandra. "He'll cancel the meeting but escalate elsewhere. We need to secure the community center immediately." Marcus called Darius. "Mayor's on the move. Activate Phase 2. By the time Marcus and Sandra arrived at the community center, 30 community members had already gathered outside. Among them were local business owners, church members, and families with children, a cross-section of the neighborhood showing support. Local news vans were setting up across the street, alerted by Angela Washington that something might happen. Marcus approached the building's entrance, where city workers were once again attempting to change the locks despite the court injunction. He didn't confront them directly, instead walking to the news vans first. "Good afternoon," he greeted the reporters. "I'm Marcus Richardson, director of the Harmony Heights Community Center. I'd like to make a brief statement about what's happening here." Cameras immediately turned toward him as he calmly explained the situation, detailing the court injunction and the mayor's apparent violation of it. As he spoke, Reverend Jackson arrived with 3 more news crews he'd contacted. Only after establishing the media presence did Marcus approach the city workers, local news cameras following him. "Gentlemen," he addressed them professionally, "I have a copy of Judge Morris's injunction prohibiting exactly what you're doing right now." He handed them the court order. "I understand you're following instructions, but I need to inform you that continuing this work would place you in contempt of court." The workers looked uncertainly at the court order, then at the cameras, then at each other. Without a word, they began packing up their tools. At that moment, a police cruiser pulled up. Chief Bennett, the Millfield police chief, stepped out and approached Marcus. "Mr. Richardson," the chief nodded, "I received orders to secure this property, but I've just been informed about a court injunction." "That's correct, Chief," Marcus confirmed, handing him a copy of the document. "Judge Morris issued it yesterday." Chief Bennett reviewed the order carefully. "In light of this, I cannot proceed with the mayor's directive." He looked at Marcus with a hint of respect. "You've done your homework." "I believe in being thorough," Marcus replied modestly. As the chief departed and the city workers drove away, the gathered community broke into applause. Marcus used the moment to invite the news crews inside for a tour of the community center, highlighting the computer lab, library, and senior services that would benefit the neighborhood. By mid-afternoon, 3 local news stations had run stories about the standoff at the community center, focusing on the contrast between the mayor's luxury development plans and the community services the center would provide. Social media was buzzing with support, and Save Harmony Heights was trending locally. Back at his home that evening, Marcus received a call from Thomas Chen. "You've been busy," Thomas said with admiration. "The AG watched the news coverage. He wants to meet tomorrow." "Good," Marcus replied, "because the mayor won't stop. Today was just a skirmish." "What's your next move?" Thomas asked. Marcus looked at his evidence board where he'd mapped out the mayor's likely responses. "The mayor has 3 options: back down, which his ego won't allow; escalate legally, which the injunction prevents for now; or try something outside proper channels." "You think he'll go that far? Power corrupts, Thomas. I've seen it hundreds of times," Marcus said quietly. "When threatened, corrupt officials follow predictable patterns." First they try to intimidate, then to discredit, and finally, when desperate enough, they attempt to destroy. You need protection, Thomas suggested. What I need, Marcus countered, is to set the perfect trap, and Mayor Harrington just gave me the idea for exactly how to do it. After ending the call, Marcus reviewed Officer Davis's recording once more, focusing on a specific comment from the mayor. Once we control those properties and the community center lot, we can announce the special assessment district. The cleanup funds will triple our investment. Marcus pulled up the environmental reports Harold had provided, studying the contamination maps and proposed cleanup zones. The pattern was clear. The mayor needed the community center property not just for the development entrance, but to avoid the most severely contaminated section of land. That's it, Marcus murmured. That's the leverage point. He picked up his phone and called Sandra. I need you to contact the EPA regional office first thing tomorrow. Tell them we have evidence of a potential Superfund site being developed without proper remediation plans. You're going nuclear, Sandra observed. The mayor left me no choice, Marcus replied. Sometimes the only way to beat corruption is to bring in forces they can't control or intimidate. As he ended the call, Marcus noticed a car driving slowly past his house for the third time that evening. He calmly took photos of the vehicle and license plate, then called Darius. Phase 3 begins tomorrow, he told the young man. Be ready. By 7 a.m., Marcus's team was executing Phase 3 of his strategy. Darius coordinated volunteers delivering folders to local businesses, each containing documentation of how the mayor's development plans would impact their operations through increased traffic, construction disruption, and eventually higher rents once property values rose. Marcus himself was preparing for his 9 a.m. meeting with the state attorney general. He reviewed his presentation one last time, 57 pages of meticulously organized evidence with a clear narrative thread connecting the mayor's actions to both civil rights violations and corruption. His phone rang. It was Angela Washington. Mr. Richardson, my editor just received a call from the mayor's office. They're planning to release a story claiming you have a criminal record that you concealed on city permit applications. Marcus smiled slightly. Right on schedule. The mayor's moving to the discrediting phase. So, it's not true, Angela asked cautiously. Not remotely, but I expected this. Can you meet me at my house in 30 minutes? I have something for you. When Angela arrived, Marcus handed her a sealed envelope. This contains my full FBI personnel file, including background checks and security clearances. I had it sent by overnight courier yesterday. Angela's eyes widened as she opened the envelope. Wait, you were the FBI director. The Marcus Richardson? For 6 years, Marcus confirmed modestly. Before that, I led the Public Corruption Division. Mayor Harrington didn't bother to run a basic background check before he started this fight. Angela was scanning the documents with growing excitement. This changes everything. Why didn't you mention this before? Because this isn't about who I was, Marcus explained. It's about protecting this community. But now that the mayor has chosen to make it personal, I'm willing to use my background strategically. May I break this story? Angela asked. That's why I called you, but hold it until noon. I need my meeting with the Attorney General first. At 9 a.m. sharp, Marcus entered the State Attorney General's temporary office at the federal building in downtown Millfield. Attorney General Lawrence Phillips, a serious man with a reputation for political independence, listened intently as Marcus presented his evidence. This is compelling, Mr. Richardson, Phillips acknowledged after the presentation. But Mayor Harrington has powerful allies in the state legislature. There will be significant blowback if we pursue this. Marcus nodded. I understand the political realities, sir. That's why I've prepared this. He slid over a document outlining a three-phase approach. First, a formal investigation announcement focused narrowly on the environmental violations. Second, the civil rights investigation regarding selective enforcement. And third, only if necessary, the corruption and financial misconduct charges. This gives the mayor 3 separate opportunities to correct course, Marcus explained. Each phase has a built-in off-ramp if he chooses to take it. Phillips studied the document. You're offering him a way out. Justice doesn't always require destruction, Marcus said quietly. Sometimes it just requires correction. The community center stays open, the discriminatory practices end, and the development proceeds with proper environmental remediation and without displacing current residents. And if he refuses all 3 off-ramps, then he faces the full consequences of his actions, Marcus replied evenly, but the choice will be his. Phillips considered this, then nodded. We'll announce the environmental investigation this afternoon. As Marcus left the meeting, his phone buzzed with notifications. The mayor's office had indeed released a statement claiming Marcus had concealed a criminal record on permit applications, suggesting the community center was part of a scheme to defraud the city. Marcus called Sandra. The mayor just jumped into our trap with both feet. Time for the countermove. At exactly noon, the Millfield Gazette published Angela's exclusive. Former FBI director behind Community Center, Marcus Richardson's return to hometown reveals mayor's corruption. The article detailed Marcus's distinguished career, his retirement to his hometown, and his systematic documentation of the mayor's misconduct. Marcus watched from a coffee shop across from City Hall as the story broke. Within minutes, other local news outlets were picking it up. By 12:30, national law enforcement sites had begun running the story. A former FBI director alleging corruption in his hometown was too compelling to ignore. At 1 p.m., the state attorney general held a press conference announcing an investigation into potential environmental violations related to the proposed development near the community center. Though carefully worded to focus only on the environmental aspects, the timing, coming just after Angela's article, created an unmistakable narrative. Marcus's phone rang. It was Chief Bennett, the police chief. "Mr. Richardson, the mayor is demanding I arrest you for falsifying permit documents." "On what evidence, Chief?" Marcus asked calmly. "That's just it, there isn't any. He's claiming you didn't disclose a 1987 arrest, but when my staff ran your background, it came back spotless. Plus, I just read you were the damn FBI director. Is that true?" "It is," Marcus confirmed, "though I'd prefer to be known as just another concerned citizen." The chief laughed. "Well, this concerned citizen has the mayor coming apart at the seams. He's called an emergency meeting with his advisors. Just wanted to give you a heads up and to let you know I won't be executing any baseless arrests." "I appreciate that, Chief, and I hope you'll attend the community center's opening this weekend. We'd be honored to have you." By mid-afternoon, community support had swelled. Dozens of residents stood vigil at the community center, local businesses donated food and drinks, and social media was flooded with Stand With Richardson hashtags alongside the earlier Save Harmony Heights. At 4 p.m., the mayor finally emerged from City Hall to address waiting reporters. His face was tight with barely controlled anger. "The allegations being spread about my administration are categorically false," he began, his voice strained. "Mr. Richardson is manipulating the media and state officials as part of a personal vendetta." A reporter called out, "Mayor Harrington, did you know Marcus Richardson was the former FBI director when you ordered the community center shut down?" The mayor faltered visibly. "Mr. Richardson's former occupation is irrelevant. The community center violates zoning regulations and—" "But sir," another reporter interrupted, "city records show your office approved all permits just 3 months ago. What changed?" "Our development priorities evolved," the mayor said stiffly. "The East Side Revitalization Project will bring jobs and tax revenue that will benefit everyone." "Will it benefit the current residents who will be forced out by higher property taxes?" called another reporter. As the mayor struggled to maintain control of the press conference, Marcus received a text from Thomas Chen. "EPA investigators arriving tomorrow morning. Mayor just found out." Marcus smiled slightly. The environmental investigation was the first domino and often the most difficult for developers to overcome. Environmental violations carried significant penalties and remediation requirements that could make the development financially non-viable. That evening, as Marcus reviewed the day's developments with his core team at his home, Harold Jenkins arrived with unexpected news. "3 council members have approached me privately," the former councilman reported. "They want to meet with you tonight. They're worried about their own exposure if the investigations expand." Marcus considered this. "The council meeting tomorrow, they could vote to rescind the cease and desist order." Harold nodded. "That's what they're suggesting. A quiet resolution that lets everyone save face." "Arrange the meeting," Marcus decided. "But make it clear, the community center stays, the discriminatory enforcement ends, and the development must include affordable housing and proper environmental remediation." The meeting took place at 9 p.m. at Reverend Jackson's church. The 3 council members, all visibly nervous, laid out their proposal. They would vote to reinstate the community center's permits if Marcus would agree to end his campaign against the mayor. Marcus listened patiently, then responded with calm authority. "Council members, I appreciate your willingness to correct course, but you misunderstand the situation. This isn't a negotiation where you hold leverage. The evidence has been provided to state and federal authorities. The investigations will proceed regardless of my actions now." The council members exchanged worried glances. "However," Marcus continued, "I believe in second chances and redemption. Tomorrow you have an opportunity to do the right thing, not just regarding the community center, but for all the residents who have been targeted by discriminatory enforcement practices." He slid forward a document outlining a comprehensive proposal: reinstating the community center's permits, establishing a citizen oversight committee for code enforcement, requiring 30% affordable housing in any new development and mandating proper environmental remediation. Support this proposal tomorrow, and I will personally speak to the Attorney General about your cooperation. This isn't about punishing individuals, it's about correcting a broken system. After the council members left, Reverend Jackson shook his head in admiration. Marcus, you've got them running scared without ever raising your voice or making a threat. The strongest position in any negotiation is having no need for the negotiation, Marcus replied. Mayor thought he was dealing with a simple retiree he could intimidate. He didn't realize he was dealing with someone who spent a career building cases against people exactly like him. As Marcus drove home that night, he noticed the same car that had been circling his house now following him at a distance. Instead of going home, he drove directly to the police station where Chief Bennett was working late. "Chief, I believe I'm being followed," Marcus explained, showing the photos he'd taken of the vehicle. "The same car has circled my house several times in the past 2 days." The chief ran the plates. "Registered to Platinum Security, a subsidiary of Platinum Properties. Want to file a report?" "Yes, please, and Chief, I'd appreciate if this information could be shared with the State Attorney General's office. It may constitute witness intimidation." By the time Marcus finally arrived home, it was nearly midnight. As he reviewed his notes for the council meeting tomorrow, his phone rang. It was Sandra. "Marcus, we just got word from our EPA contact. The preliminary soil samples from the development site show contamination levels 10 times higher than disclosed in the mayor's documentation. The EPA is expanding their investigation to include potential criminal violations for the falsified environmental impact statements." Marcus made a note of this development. "The mayor's house of cards is collapsing faster than I anticipated." "You've built quite a case in just a few days," Sandra observed. "The Marcus Richardson I remember from the Bureau would be proud." "I never left the Bureau behind," Marcus replied quietly. "I just found a new way to seek justice." As he prepared for bed, Marcus reflected on how quickly events had unfolded. The mayor had severely underestimated him, assuming that an older black man returning to his hometown would be an easy target. That miscalculation was about to cost Harrington everything he valued: his power, his reputation, and possibly his freedom. Tomorrow would bring the council vote, and with it, the first public test of whether the system could begin to correct itself. Marcus was prepared for either outcome, victory or continued battle. He had faced more powerful opponents than Mayor William Harrington during his FBI career, and he had the patience to see this through to the end. By 7 a.m., Marcus was reviewing the latest developments with his core team. The EPA's preliminary findings had created a new dynamic. Environmental violations carried potential criminal penalties that even the mayor's political connections couldn't easily dismiss. "The council meeting starts at 10 a.m., Marcus told the assembled group. "Based on last night's conversation, I expect the 3 council members to support our proposal, but they'll face pressure from the mayor." Sandra handed him a tablet displaying a new email. "The Attorney General just confirmed they're expanding the investigation to include the civil rights violations. This gives us more leverage." Marcus nodded. "Perfect timing. Darius, what's the status of community attendance for the meeting?" "We'll have at least 70 people there," Darius reported. "Reverend Jackson arranged transportation for the seniors who can't drive themselves." "Excellent." Marcus turned to Angela Washington. "The Gazette will cover the meeting. Front page guaranteed," she confirmed. And 3 other news outlets have confirmed attendance after yesterday's revelations. At 8:30 a.m., as Marcus was preparing to leave for City Hall, he received an unexpected call from Calvin Pierce, the mayor's chief of staff. "Mr. Richardson," Pierce's voice was tense, "the mayor would like to meet privately before the council session, just the 2 of you." "I'm afraid that's not possible," Marcus replied calmly. "Any discussions should include community representatives." He's prepared to make significant concessions. "Then he can present them publicly at the council meeting," Marcus said firmly. "Transparency is non-negotiable at this point." Pierce paused. "He said you'd say that. He wanted me to mention that he has information about certain irregularities in the community center's funding that might interest federal authorities." Marcus smiled slightly. "Mr. Pierce, are you conveying a threat of false allegations if I don't meet privately with the mayor?" "I'm just delivering a message," Pierce replied evasively. "Then please deliver this message in return. I've already provided my complete financial records to the State Attorney General as part of my evidence submission. The mayor is welcome to review them there." After ending the call, Marcus turned to Sandra. "The mayor's getting desperate. He's trying to manufacture leverage where none exists." "Classic corner drop behavior," Sandra observed. "Be careful, Marcus. His next move could be unpredictable." City Hall was already crowded when Marcus arrived at 9:30 a.m. Community members filled the public seating area, many wearing blue Save Harmony Heights t-shirts Darius had arranged to be printed overnight. News cameras were set up along the back wall, and EPA officials stood conversing quietly near the entrance. Marcus spotted Officer Davis and approached him discreetly. "Thank you for your courage," he said quietly. "Your recording made a significant difference." Davis nodded nervously. "The mayor's been on a rampage all morning. He knows someone from inside provided evidence." "You're protected under whistleblower statutes," Marcus assured him, "and I have friends at the Department of Justice who take witness protection very seriously." At precisely 10 a.m., the council session began. Mayor Harrington entered last, his face a mask of controlled anger. As the procedural matters were addressed, Marcus noticed the mayor conferring intensely with two council members who had been his reliable supporters. When the community center matter came up on the agenda, Councilwoman Alina Chen, one of the three who had met with Marcus the previous night, requested permission to speak. "After careful review of the documentation and community input," she began, "I move that we rescind the cease and desist order against the Harmony Heights Community Center and reinstate all previously approved permits." Mayor Harrington immediately interjected. "Councilwoman Chen, this matter requires further study. I move to table this item until the next session." "With respect, Mayor," Chen continued firmly, "this situation requires immediate resolution. Furthermore, I propose the following additions to my motion: establishment of a Citizen Oversight Committee for Code Enforcement, a requirement that any development in the East Side include at least 30% affordable housing, and mandatory adherence to EPA remediation standards for all construction in the affected area." A murmur ran through the chamber as Councilman James Rodriguez seconded the motion. Marcus watched carefully as the council members' positions became clear through their body language. It would be close. Mayor Harrington's face reddened. "This is outrageous. This proposal would kill the East Side Development Project entirely." "Not kill it, Mayor," Councilwoman Chen replied calmly. "Simply ensure it benefits all residents, not just developers and their investors." As debate continued, Marcus noticed a subtle shift in the room. Two council members who had previously aligned with the mayor were now avoiding his gaze, studying the proposal documents intently. The momentum was building. When the vote finally came, the result stunned everyone, including Marcus. The motion passed 7-2, with only the mayor and one steadfast ally opposed. Several council members who had reliably supported the mayor's initiatives for years had switched positions. As applause erupted from the community members present, Mayor Harrington stood abruptly. "This meeting is adjourned," he declared, his voice tight with fury. "Actually, Mayor," the council secretary interjected, "there are 3 more agenda items requiring votes." "I said this meeting is adjourned," the mayor snapped, storming out of the chamber. In his absence, Vice Mayor Rodriguez took over, continuing the meeting with remarkable efficiency. The remaining agenda items were addressed, and the session concluded formally at 11:45 a.m. Outside City Hall, community members gathered around Marcus, celebrating their victory. Local news reporters sought statements, which Marcus provided with characteristic humility, focusing on the community rather than his own role. "Today, the system worked as it should," he told the assembled cameras. "The people's representatives listened to the people's voices. This isn't about one community center, it's about establishing that every neighborhood deserves equal protection, equal services, and equal respect." As the crowd dispersed, Thomas Chen approached Marcus. "The Attorney General is impressed with how this has unfolded. He's prepared to offer Mayor Harrington a deal, resign, and cooperate with the ongoing investigations in exchange for leniency." "Will he take it?" Marcus asked. Thomas shrugged. "Hard to say. His ego may prevent him from seeing it's his best option." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Keep me informed, and Thomas, thank you for your support through this. Not every public official would have had the courage to stand against political pressure." By mid-afternoon, Marcus was back at the community center where volunteers were preparing for Saturday's grand opening. The mood was celebratory but focused. There was still work to be done. Darius approached, his expression concerned. "Mr. Richardson, there's something you should see." He handed Marcus his phone, displaying a social media post from a local business owner. "City inspectors just showed up at my restaurant. They say the mayor personally ordered an emergency health inspection after someone reported seeing rats." "Which restaurant?" Marcus asked. "Martin's Soul Food. Mr. Martin spoke at yesterday's press conference supporting the community center." Marcus immediately called Chief Bennett. "If we have a situation developing, the mayor is targeting businesses that supported us." "I'm already hearing about it," the chief replied grimly. 4 businesses hit in the last hour, all owned by people who publicly supported your cause." "This crosses a line," Marcus said. "It's clear retaliation and abuse of power." "I agree. I've already contacted the state attorney general's office, but Richardson, the mayor's acting erratically. My officers report he showed up at one inspection, shouting orders. This isn't normal behavior even for him." After ending the call, Marcus convened an emergency meeting with his core team. The mayor's conducting a scorched earth campaign against our supporters. We need to respond quickly. Sandra pulled up her laptop. I can have the Attorney General file for an emergency injunction against all inspections ordered today, citing clear retaliatory intent. Do it, Marcus agreed. And Angela, we need media coverage of this immediately. Get cameras to those businesses. As they mobilized their response, Marcus received an unexpected visitor, Calvin Pierce, the mayor's chief of staff, looking haggard and nervous. Mr. Richardson, may I speak with you privately? In Marcus's temporary office, Pierce sank into a chair. The mayor's lost control. He's ordering mass firings of anyone he suspects of disloyalty. He's destroying documents. I'm concerned he might be destroying evidence relevant to the investigations. Marcus studied the man carefully. Why are you telling me this, Mr. Pierce? Because I've worked for the city for 23 years, Pierce replied. I've done things I'm not proud of under Mayor Harrington, but I never signed up for what's happening now. What exactly is happening? Marcus pressed. Pierce hesitated. The environmental report that was filed with the state, the one showing acceptable contamination levels, it was fabricated. The mayor knew the real levels would make the development impossible without major remediation costs. He personally ordered the substitution of soil samples from another location. That's a federal offense, Marcus noted. Pierce nodded miserably. I know, I didn't participate in it, but I knew about it. And there's more. The mayor has a private email server where he's conducted city business to avoid public records requirements. That server contains communications with developers that explicitly discuss targeting minority-owned properties for code violations to drive down property values. Marcus took careful notes. Mr. Pierce, would you be willing to provide a formal statement to state investigators? If I'm guaranteed protection, Pierce said quietly, the mayor has powerful friends. People who have crossed him have found themselves unemployable in this state. I can arrange that, Marcus assured him. But we need to act quickly. If the mayor is destroying evidence, every hour counts. After Pierce left, Marcus immediately called Thomas Chen. We need a preservation order for all city records and the mayor's personal devices immediately. We have a credible report of ongoing evidence destruction. I'll have it within the hour, Thomas promised. The judge is already briefed on the case. By evening, the situation had escalated dramatically. State police had served the preservation order at City Hall and the mayor's residence. News cameras captured Mayor Harrington shouting at officers as they secured his office computer and files. Meanwhile, the Attorney General had obtained the emergency injunction halting all inspections ordered that day, and EPA officials had expanded their environmental testing to include the falsified sampling locations identified by Pierce. As darkness fell, Marcus sat alone in his living room, reviewing the day's developments. The victory at the council meeting had been significant, but the mayor's retaliatory actions had revealed just how deep the corruption ran. His phone rang, Chief Bennett again. Richardson, I thought you should know, the mayor was just escorted from City Hall by his private security. He appeared to be intoxicated and making threats. Among other things, he specifically mentioned you several times. What kind of threats? Marcus asked calmly. Vague but concerning, something about making you regret coming back to Millfield. I've assigned a patrol car to monitor your street tonight as a precaution. I appreciate that, Chief. But please don't pull resources from other areas on my account. I can take care of myself. After ending the call, Marcus methodically checked his home's security. Old habits from his FBI days resurfaced as he secured windows and doors, positioned furniture to provide cover if needed, and kept his phone charged and within reach. As he completed his security check, Marcus paused at the window, watching the quiet street outside. The mayor's behavior was following a predictable pattern for cornered corruption, from denial to rage to desperate actions. Tomorrow would likely bring the final phase, self-preservation at any cost. Marcus was prepared for whatever came next. He had faced more dangerous opponents than William Harrington during his FBI career. More importantly, he had justice and the community on his side. The mayor had only his crumbling power and wounded pride. Your move, Mr. Mayor, Marcus murmured to the darkness outside. But choose wisely, the game is almost over. Dawn broke over Millfield with an unusual energy in the air. News crews had established positions outside City Hall, the community center, and the mayor's residence, anticipating developments in what local stations were now calling the Richardson Revelation. Marcus rose early, reviewing updates that had arrived overnight. The state attorney general's office had expanded its investigation, adding 3 prosecutors specializing in public corruption. The EPA had issued preliminary findings confirming contamination levels far exceeding those reported in official documents. Most significantly, 2 city council members had publicly called for Mayor Harrington's resignation. At 7:30 a.m., Sandra arrived with coffee and fresh intelligence. The mayor didn't go home last night, she reported. He checked into the Millfield Grand Hotel using his brother-in-law's name. He's holed up in a suite with his attorney. Marcus nodded. He's preparing his exit strategy. Has the Attorney General presented the deal? Scheduled for 9 a.m. Resignation in exchange for cooperation and reduced charges. His attorney is recommending he take it. As Marcus and Sandra discussed next steps, Darius burst in, his expression urgent. Mr. Richardson, someone broke into the community center overnight. The computer lab is trashed and files are missing from your office. Marcus remained calm. Was anything else damaged? No, just the computers and your files. The security cameras were disabled first. They knew what they were doing. Call Chief Bennett, Marcus instructed. And Angela Washington, we need this documented properly. By 8:30 a.m., the community center had become a crime scene. Police technicians gathered evidence while news cameras recorded from outside. Marcus walked Chief Bennett through the targeted nature of the break-in. They only took files related to the mayor's development plans and our evidence gathering, Marcus explained. Nothing else was touched, not even the new computers. Chief Bennett frowned. This has Harrington written all over it. Too little too late, though you've already provided copies of everything to state investigators, right? Of course, Marcus confirmed. And secured cloud backups. This was a desperate move by someone who doesn't understand modern evidence preservation. At 9:15 a.m., as Marcus was coordinating repairs to the community center, Thomas Chen called with breaking news. The mayor rejected the deal, Thomas reported. His attorney actually recommended accepting it, but Harrington overruled him. He scheduled a press conference for noon. To announce his resignation, Marcus asked. No, his attorney says he plans to fight these baseless accusations and expose the conspiracy against progress in Millfield. Marcus considered this development. He's making a critical mistake. The evidence is overwhelming. The Attorney General agrees, Thomas replied. He's authorized us to proceed with formal charges regardless of the press conference. We'll be filing them at 11 a.m., 1 hour before the mayor speaks. By 10:30 a.m., the community had rallied once again. Volunteers were already repairing the damaged computer lab, with local businesses donating replacement equipment. The break-in, rather than demoralizing supporters, had energized them, bringing even more community members to help. Reverend Jackson approached Marcus as he supervised the repairs. Marcus, I've known you since you were a boy. I've never seen anyone unite this community like you have these past days. The community was always united in spirit, Marcus replied. They just needed someone to show them their power. At precisely 11 a.m., Attorney General Phillips held a brief press conference on the steps of the state courthouse. With calm authority, he announced formal charges against Mayor William Harrington, multiple counts of corruption, civil rights violations, environmental crimes, and now witness intimidation and evidence tampering. The investigation remains ongoing, Phillips concluded, but the evidence already gathered necessitates immediate action. We have requested and received judicial approval for search warrants that are being executed as we speak. As the Attorney General spoke, state police were indeed entering the mayor's office, home, and hotel suite, securing computers, phones, and documents. The mayor's private email server, revealed by Pierce, was being seized from a storage facility registered to his brother-in-law's company. At 11:45 a.m., 15 minutes before his scheduled press conference, Mayor Harrington was taken into custody at the Millfield Grand Hotel. News helicopters captured footage of the mayor, disheveled and visibly angry, being escorted to a police vehicle. The mayor's press conference, needless to say, was canceled. By early afternoon, Marcus had returned to the community center, where final preparations for Saturday's grand opening continued despite the morning's setback. As he reviewed the program with Darius, Vice Mayor Rodriguez arrived, accompanied by several council members. Mr. Richardson, Rodriguez began formally, the City Council has voted to issue an official apology for the treatment you and this community have endured. Furthermore, we've established an emergency fund to ensure the community center opens as scheduled, with additional resources for expanded programming. One of the council members stepped forward. We've also initiated a comprehensive review of all code enforcement actions over the past 5 years, with the goal of identifying and rectifying any discriminatory patterns. Marcus accepted their statements with grace. The community appreciates your commitment to correction and healing. This is how progress begins, with acknowledgement and concrete action. After the officials departed, Sandra joined Marcus in his office. The Attorney General's office just called. They've found extensive evidence on the seized devices, including explicit discussions of targeting minority-owned properties and falsifying environmental reports. The mayor's facing decades in prison if convicted on all counts. Justice will take its course, Marcus said simply. Our focus now is rebuilding. By Friday afternoon, news of the mayor's arrest and the corruption investigation had spread nationally. the story of a former FBI director returning to his hometown and exposing entrenched corruption had captured public imagination. National news programs requested interviews, which Marcus politely declined, preferring to focus on the community center's opening. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright. By 9 a.m., hundreds of community members had gathered outside the Harmony Heights Community Center for the grand opening. The damaged computer lab had been fully restored, with additional equipment donated by local businesses and a major tech company that had learned of the center's mission. At 10 a.m., Marcus stepped to the podium, surveying the assembled crowd with quiet satisfaction. State officials, including Attorney General Phillips, stood alongside community members. News cameras captured the moment as Marcus prepared to speak. "Today marks not an ending but a beginning," he started, his deep voice carrying across the crowd. "This community center represents more than just a building. It represents our collective belief that every neighborhood deserves investment, every child deserves opportunity, and every senior deserves dignity." As Marcus continued his address, he noted faces in the crowd: Darius, whose leadership potential had blossomed during the crisis; Mrs. Robinson, whose meticulous records had helped document the pattern of discrimination; Officer Davis, who had found the courage to stand against wrongdoing; and dozens of others who had contributed in ways large and small. "The events of this past week have revealed both challenges and strengths in our community," Marcus continued. "We've seen how corruption can distort public service, but we've also seen how ordinary citizens, standing together with truth and persistence, can restore balance to the scales of justice." He concluded by introducing the center's programs: after-school tutoring, job training, senior services, computer literacy, and community gathering spaces, all designed to uplift the neighborhood from within. As Marcus cut the ribbon, officially opening the center's doors, the crowd erupted in applause. Children rushed in first, eager to explore the library and gymnasium. Seniors followed more sedately, admiring the comfortable meeting rooms and computer stations designed with their needs in mind. Throughout the day, Marcus moved through the center, watching with quiet satisfaction as his vision became reality. Community members of all ages filled the spaces, bringing life and purpose to what had once been an abandoned building. In the late afternoon, as the celebration continued, Marcus found a quiet moment to step outside. He stood on the steps looking out at the neighborhood where he had grown up, the streets where he had played as a child, the school where he had first dreamed of a career in law enforcement, the church where his parents had taught him about justice and dignity. Sandra joined him, handing him a cup of coffee. "Quite a homecoming, Marcus," he smiled. "Not what I expected when I retired. I thought I'd be fishing and reading history books." "Some people can't stop seeking justice," she observed. "It's in their DNA." "The work is never finished," Marcus agreed. "Next week, we start the Citizens Oversight Committee for Code Enforcement. The month after that, we review the development plans to ensure they include affordable housing. The battle against corruption isn't won in a single skirmish." "At least you've got a community behind you now," Sandra noted, gesturing to the center filled with engaged citizens. Marcus nodded, watching as Darius led a group of teenagers on a tour of the computer lab. "That's the real victory, not exposing one corrupt mayor but awakening a community to its own power." As sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, Marcus Richardson stood on the threshold of the community center bearing his mother's favorite word: harmony. In just 1 week, he had transformed a personal project into a movement for accountability and justice. The former FBI director had returned home not to retire, but to begin a new chapter, one where the skills honed over decades of public service could help rebuild the community that had shaped him. Inside the center, children laughed as they explored the library. Seniors gathered in conversation circles, sharing memories and hopes. Young adults signed up for job training programs that would open new opportunities. This was justice in its most meaningful form, not merely punishment for wrongdoing, but the creation of something better in its place. As darkness fell, the lights of the Harmony Heights Community Center shone brightly, a beacon of possibility in a neighborhood that would never again be overlooked or underestimated. Marcus Richardson had come home, and home was stronger for his return.